a very successful and innovative mechanism, PAT program, has been implemented. The PAT 1, wherein the specific energy reduction saving targets have been given to the energy intensive industries. In case they are able to achieve the target and they overachieve the target, they are issued energy saving certificates which can be traded. And in case there is a shortfall, that can be met either by purchase of energy saving certificates or otherwise there are panel provisions. The second cycle of the PAT has been started from this year. Earlier there were 8 sectors, now 3 more sectors have been included in this area. One is railways, which are all the major energy consumer, discoms as well as refineries. In the lighting sector, which consumes about 25% of the energy, the major initiative has been taken by replacing the conventional lights with LED lights. As on date, more than 16 crores lights have been replaced, and the same way the street lights are also being replaced. In agriculture sector also, in order to conserve the energy and to manage the demand, the program has been initiated to replace the inefficient pumps with the energy efficient pumps. Energy Efficiency Services Limited, a joint venture of power sector PSUs, is implementing this program without any upfront cost on the part of consumers or the government. The investment made by ESL is being recovered through energy savings over the years. All these measures of the energy efficiency have resulted in capacity added at more than 500 megawatt. So, with these words, I can say that there is a lot of focus in the government policies on clean energy generation as well as on energy conservation to avoid the generational capacity which can be saved through energy conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajpal. May I now request Mr. Anil Sardana to make the theme presentation and take us through his thoughts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to really talk from the presentation, but get to the subject. As you clearly can see, this session is about conventional power, and then it asks, intriguingly, strategies and solutions towards clean energy. And I'm assuming the program managers wanted us to talk about perhaps coal. I would also include in the conventional power all such formats of power which perhaps were not there until the renewable power started to come in. But primarily coal power. So what exactly can we do vis-a-vis the conventional power, and what exactly is the mainstay? I'm going to just take you through that part. We all understand that there is tremendous buzz today about renewables, tremendous buzz about the fact that the fossil power must reduce. I saw in the gathering today number of delegates from South Asian countries, number of delegates from African countries. And I just want to build one context. And this is a small study that we did to actually work on the fact, is it a fashion statement to decry fossil power, or is it genuinely an issue of the future generations getting haunted with the emissions that happen? And very interestingly, I just want to quote this example. We looked at such of the population which has no access to electricity. Such of the population which has no access to electricity, they use alternate formats like wood chips, kerosene, diesel. And then we looked at a hamlet and multiplied that by number of hamlets in terms of what their energy consumptions are. So we looked at the smaller hamlets, we looked at reasonable sized hamlets, and then multiplied that with their energy consumption using alternate means. And I just want to give you the final outcome, that when we multiply a number of villages and see the alternate form of energy they use, they actually produce 3 times more emissions than a subcritical boiler. So which goes on to prove that such of the protagonists which are talking about fossil power to actually get off the system are basically nothing but people with vested interest. For the simple reason that those who don't have access to clean power are actually creating 3 times the emission that an equivalent fossil power will create. And I'm talking about technology which perhaps can certainly be improvised. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point, which is very important for us to understand, that there is hardly any elasticity in people to really spend more from their share of wallet. Way back in 2011, CRISIL did a study, and this is Indian context, where they found that the rural Indian is spending 12% at least, I'm talking about at least 12% of share of wallet or household income towards electricity or energy needs. Whereas in the urban system, we are spending something like 7 to 8% of our household income. In the context of developed nations, this amount is just about 3%, 2 to 3% of our household income. So which clearly shows that there is hardly any stretch in people to spend more on electricity. If that elasticity doesn't exist, it again brings us to the point that you need competitive formats of generation. If you're going to talk about renewables, well, it's very good. It's important to have renewables, but at what price? Will the price be affordable to normal public is a question that we need to answer. And therefore, we need to have conventional power, but we need to have it with higher efficiency. That's the context for which this session is rolled on, and I thought it is important to build that context because that's an important subject to do. The other part which is important for many of the people that I talked in terms of the fact that whether it is Indian context, whether it is African context, and some of the other countries in Southeast Asia, the per capita consumption is way too low. We are talking about less than 1,000 kilowatt hour per person per year, which clearly means that the quality of life today does not use everything that ultimately has to be automotive, ultimately has to be by virtue of electricity being used as the means to do various activities. We have to therefore work on sectoral consumption improvement, and that is only possible if you again have competitive electricity and not just go with the fashion statement, and therefore brings the importance of conventional electricity again. I want to give one very important factor to the Indian context. Today, the Indian power sector size is about $20 to $20 billion a year. How do you find that? You have 1250 million people, you multiply by 5 rupees average cost of production, multiply that with per capita consumption of 1,000, and you get the billion-dollar size. We are a 20 billion electricity economy, and compared to that, most of the developed nations are a $100 billion electricity economy. If you have no elasticity in the present context, if your size is so small, and the size has not changed the needle in the last 7 years, we have been $20 billion in last 7 years. Bring again the important part to say, unless the electricity prices become competitive, unless we make sure that it is affordable and it is elastic in terms of people buying more electricity for lesser cost of power, it's not going to add more capacity, nor it's going to make the sector sustainable. Again brings the important point, how the entire electricity pricing mechanism, including the mix between conventional and the other power, will have to be maintained. It's important, therefore, to keep that in the mind before we contextualize and before we discuss this subject. The other important part, today India as a country can hardly afford, as I said, but we have anything like 60 to 90 gigawatt of DG sets which run in this country. And I'm not saying that we have actually counted that bottoms up. We have actually used the fuel consumption, a study which we asked PCRA to do because nobody was willing to give us the size of the DG sets in their works. Therefore, we asked PCRA to get down to checking how much oil is being used by people for standby capacity and applying a plant load factor of about 25%. We checked what is the gigawatt capacity of standby sets. It's a whooping number, 60 to 90 gigawatt. Again, can we afford that power? The answer is no. And who could replace that? The answer is conventional power can replace that very well. And of course, some part of the day, certainly the non-conventional power, if you want to call that as renewable power, that certainly can do the trick as well. So those are the important factors which make the case for conventional power. But again, important part is we must improve the efficiency. This slide shows you what is possible when it comes to improving the efficiency of conventional power. There are technologies. I don't have to teach this gathering in terms of what is possible. You certainly can do ultra supercritical, you can do supercritical. Examples are in front of us. We can therefore improvise on efficiency. The second important part, there are emission reduction technologies. There is need for us to improvise on the environmental benign aspect of these stations. Many of the aspects which have been thrown open by Ministry of Environment and Forests have been resisted by industry. My personal recommendation is we should go methodical but adapt those and try and therefore improvise the benignness of the coal-based power. But of course, over a period of time and also depending on the size of the units and perhaps age on the bar or the age that is left out for the asset. Third important part is the carbon capture and storage, which is again an important aspect to improve efficiency and make sure that we make conventional power become the darling of people. How can you do that? It's digital. Today everyone is very bothered about the fact that it emits carbon dioxide, it emits greenhouse gases. Imagine tomorrow you have a technology which is able to capture and use the carbon dioxide to create maybe fuel. Next day itself, people will say, we want more coal-based power, and it will be a welcome sign. And it's digital. Today there are efforts being done. We are involved in a project along with some of the US universities where we are trying to work out how to convert carbon dioxide to a fuel system, because all said and done, it can be hydrocarbon when you engage it, carbon dioxide and the hydrocarbons, water for example, and convert that into a fuel. Next, and the last part is coal beneficiation technology, where in the Indian context we have taken too long a time to ultimately beneficiate coal or to wash coal. It's important to do that. It's important, in fact, the laws of the country to be more proactive in identifying the source of the coal on a permanent basis so that coal washing becomes a reality. I have been personally involved with setting up a private sector, in fact, the first private sector coal washery in India. And this was a state where we are all sitting, which was one of the beneficiaries who bought from those washeries at that time. But it's certainly a doable aspect in terms of making sure that we beneficiate coal. And assuming that conventional format is also gas, we should have more and more of mechanism to get gas. Of course, we are 26th number in terms of the gas capacity as it exists below our crest. So therefore, we are not going to have gas. But leave that part. We can always import gas. But where is the cost spent? The cost is spent in liquefaction and gasification and transportation. We are working on a project which is nothing new, but making sure that we get compressed gas and not liquefy the gas, and therefore have ships which can bring compressed gas. As we talk, the ships are under design, and we will soon be able to get gas at perhaps half the price of the price that you see today by virtue of those compressed gas ships. So friends, I just wanted to lay the context in terms of the fact that conventional power is the need as much as we need renewable power. More important part is we need to make it benign. We need to make sure it's sustainable and not just go by anything that we can deliver at inefficient levels. There are policy interventions that will help them. These are some of those which are there. I don't want to go through each one of those. But more important part is we need to work through and see as to how we can coexist with the new fashion concepts of having renewable power, and also making sure that we have base load through conventional power in a manner that we can actually improvise on elasticity and make sure people consume more at a lower price, and make sure that Make in India program succeeds. And similarly, countries like Africa, countries like in Southeast Asia who have similar problems are able to make sure that affordable power is also provided in the grid in a similar manner as we talk about the newer formats of power. Soma just mentioned in the briefing, that's the kind of commitment that we have done in line with what we believe is sustainable. Today we are one of the largest renewable operating player with close to about 2,300 megawatt of operating capacity in renewable and close to about 7,500 megawatt plus operating in the conventional side of the power. And we will continue to make sure that we provide affordable power in both models to the people at large. Thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you, Mr. Sardana. I think that really touched the point as well as hit the nail on the head. While we are going on this ambitious drive on renewable, which is very much the mantra of India as well as around the world, India has to keep its convention in a very sustainable way, and doing it sustainably also ensures that we try to balance renewable and the conventional power. And I think a very interesting point was the compressed natural gas point, because we are looking at bridge fuels like gas-based power to actually see that we can do our renewable power in a sustainable way. I'm now going to call upon Mr. Gurdeep Singh, Chairman NTPC. NTPC, as I just explained, is India's leading company. It has set up the largest capacity. It has been in the thermal state, but it has now moved on to hydel also. And we now look forward to your thoughts, Mr. Singh, on how this story goes forward.
Good afternoon. I think the context has been set by Mr. Sardana entirely and covering most of the aspects, and it is heartening to hear in the conferences that coal power is going to stay, or the conventional power is going to stay. Otherwise, these days, everywhere wherever we are going, I think then the talk is only about the renewables and renewables. So how to see that the renewable is going to be observed, I think this is another subject, but just to go through some of the points of the topic, that what is the this is screen. Just come out. But what I'm just going to just touch off a few points is that Indian power sector, what is the growth and the demand, then the option for cleaner energy, and NTPC's initiatives towards the cleaner initiatives. So I think, and everybody would have been given then some handouts. What I just prepared few slides. Today, the per capita consumption is approximately 1,000 units per head, which is very, very low compared to the international standard. And as Mr. Sardana also just mentioned, that there is a kind of what is a kind of potential and how it can be met. And the answer is that in the foreseeable future, we will have to rely on the conventional power. So this is what I was just mentioning, that the India's per capita consumption is very low. The world average is around 3,000, so we are still around one third of that. And if we have to really go, then what is kind of the capacity which will be requiring? I think this is a very small. So I think this slide must give you that there is a space for everyone, whether it's a renewable, whether it's a conventional, and the conventional, whether it's a coal-based or gas-based, or what we are talking about, the hydro, even the conventional in Indian context, we normally the large hydro what we include. As we just mentioned that the coal is going to remain the integral part of India's energy security, and even by 2032, I think this 50% of the capacity will be, at least will be required from the coal-based. So what are the options for the clean energy? If it has to go, if it has to be there, what we should be doing and how we make sure that whatever the energy we are going to generate, it is going to be cleaner energy. I think that is the point, what is more important than debating that what kind of percentage, etc., it will be there. So this is one. On the supply side is if you have to keep the total and kind of the footprint and lower, then accelerate the introduction of renewable and non-fossil, what I think the total thrust which is going on at present. And next one is the aggressive focus on the high energy efficiency technology and adoption of the stringent emission norms for the new capacities. On the demand side, it's lowering the energy intensity. I think this we have all heard today morning also that how the LEDs are really helping. The further than it's going to be for the other appliances, whether it's air conditioner or the motors. On the INDCs, it is pertinent to the power sector is to reduce the emission intensity is 33 to 35% by 2030 from 2005 level, to achieve about 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity from the non-fossil fuel-based energy sources, and to create a carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. I think there is a lot of work which is going on that. Even in NTPC, this year we are planting 1 crore trees across the country. Some of the norms what has been specified, these are, I just mentioning here that these are type of very stringent in nature and kind of the best across the globe, what it can be. And going forward, whatever the going to be capacity which is meeting the international standard, rather exceeding the most of the countries. The CO2 level is increasing. As far as greenhouse gas emission, this is the prediction what being talked about. It is going to be only around 2037 or so. This is going to get fluid. As far as we are concerned, we are as India. Our kind of CO2 per capita is very low in comparison to the other developed countries. Giving on something on the NTPC, we today 47,228 megawatt, another 24,000 megawatt is under construction, which is mainly coal-based, but it's mainly the supercritical units which are going to be the much efficient. We have some 10 coal mines, which there is a lot of work which is going on that. 22,000 plus dedicated workforce, 23 JVs, and 5 subsidiaries. Focus on the clean power since inception from NTPC side, that we had been trying, depending on the technology of that time, and we had been progressively taking up the steps what is required. First was the emission control in all our plants. From the beginning we had been taking steps, whether it's the ESPs or the others. Then the energy enhancement, energy efficiency enhancement, the supercritical technology introduction, which I just mentioned, and lately we have aggressively adding the renewables, and in that also it's mainly solar. So our first plant, like say this is 500 megawatt in 1999, which was having 38% efficiency. Today, I think the new plant, the Khargaon plant, is going to be 40 more than 41%. And we are working on an ultra supercritical technology along with BHEL and IGCAR, where the efficiency will go to 46%. As I just mentioned, that we are adding aggressively on the renewables, and we have out of 100 gigawatt of the solar, NTPC is going to invest itself on 10 gigawatt and try to purchase through the developer another 15 gigawatt and in turn sell to the discoms. So that is a kind of the role which we are trying to play in this game. Our CO2 emission will be, the target is to reduce by 20%, which is presently 0.939 kg per unit to 0.75 kg. And this is what, as I just mentioned, on the stringent norms, on the environment norms, we are working aggressively on that in a coordinated manner, be it SOx, NOx, or the SPM level, and all the new plants, like the new plants, which is already started construction in the month of January, it will be compliant to the new norms what has been specified. Adoption of some of the other new technologies, I think this is, we can talk about that, probably this is not the right kind of time frame what we'll be having, but mostly what suits to the different country, we should be working on that, and in that what I just mentioned, that it should be the emphasis should be on increasing the efficiency, thereby reducing the CO2 emission and try to comply on the emissions on the SOx, NOx side. We had tried and in the past like IGCC, but I think the results were not very encouraging. Carbon capture and storage is being studied, but there are issues in that. So I think then the main focus is that how we can really utilize the coal which is abundantly available in the country and utilize in a way that it is very efficiently utilized and at the same time in a very, very clean environment from the SOx and NOx sides. I think this is the sum and substance what probably is required, and NTPC is committed and working tirelessly towards achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. As you heard from him, NTPC being a leader is already talking of the supercritical technology. Some of the newer plants in India are coming on supercritical technology. The logo, or rather the motto for the conventional power guys is to make it as efficient as possible while keeping emissions at its lowest level, because coal will remain a mainstay for India's energy part story and India's energy security, having blessed with that natural resource, even as we strive to make renewable a very important part of our energy basket. Finally, I will call upon Mr. Sumit Gulati, Additional Chief Secretary, Energy and Petrochemicals. Sir, in the first session, we heard extensively how Gujarat has always played a pivotal role and a leadership role in showing the way when it comes to new technologies, development and industrialization. In the renewable story too, we have heard that. But that has happened even though we know of the largest thermal power plants included those based on imported coal coming up in the state of Gujarat. It would be nice if you could share with us the policy interventions and the government's role in seeing that industry develops in a very balanced fashion when it comes to the energy options for the country.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Gujarat, welcome to Vadodara. I must begin by thanking Mr. Sardana for making a very strong case that the conventional power generation shall survive, and so shall Gurdeep Singh, at least for the next foreseeable future. for Gujarat, imported coal is a new thing, relatively. Otherwise, coal is very far away. And Gujarat does not have much of hydro potential either. It has a little bit of lignite, now a little bit of gas. So Gujarat has been customizing its response based on what it had. I remember, having joined this state about 25, 30 years ago, we used to talk of a deficit of about 18%, 10%, and then eventually we entered the stage when we became power surplus. Mr. Sardana also touched upon possibility of technologies and efficiencies which could make the power cheaper and compete with other energy sources. And he made out a very strong case that almost twice the energy requirement is met from non-electric sources, given the low per capita consumption of electricity. But the per capita consumption of electricity in Gujarat is nearer 2,000 than 1,000. We are 1,800 plus. And therefore, we look at the energy mix slightly differently. One does hope that technologies which have a kind of a closed cycle where carbon dioxide can again be converted into fuel and reused, that would be wonderful. And if compressed gas could become cheaper in the next 5-10 years, half the price of LNG, nothing could be better. But till such time, I guess we will have to live with coal. And the carbon emissions have been increasing. Although it may not be the only culprit, maybe there are other contributing factors, stronger ones. And therefore, there is definitely a need to look at how to improve upon the conventional power generation systems, which are basically coal-based or fossil fuel-based. Gujarat had this issue of high cost of coal, imported coal or coal carried from far away. Therefore, it started looking at other alternatives and pioneered in wind and solar in a way in India. The result is today out of the 25,000 megawatts that we have, we owe about 5,000 to wind and solar as we talk today, out of which roughly 4,000 is wind and about 1,100, 1,200 is solar. And the impact is about 7 to 8% increase in tariff overall. Today, a consumer in Gujarat pays about 27 paisa per unit more for having the solar power which has joined in. But there is a healthy trend in the sense that for solar, that the cost of generation steadily has been declining, and one hears that recently there has been almost a crash in the prices of PV panels. Therefore, how we look at cleaner technologies for the conventional power is that one, as my friends mentioned, that there should be more emphasis on washed coal and clean coal. Most of our thermal plants are fairly old, almost 30 years old. So there is a crying need for quick replacement with improved technology which will ensure reduction in carbon emissions. Then most of our gas capacity is today idling. We get almost, as a country, about 22% of our total capacity utilization from the gas plants. Therefore, there is a need to find out mechanisms where, like the e-bid RLNG, to continue and make more gas available. The new generation capacities could look at variable generation so as to compensate for the variability which is inherent today in the renewable energy generation. Then there would also be a case for large size supercritical technology generation with higher efficiency and also replace the smaller ones, which are perhaps a little less efficient and emit far more carbon dioxide. In the second option, that is integrating the renewable energy sources and optimizing with the conventional power generation, the options that we look at are that there should be forecasting mechanisms for the renewable energy generation. They should be in place to optimize the RE generation and to reduce its impact of infirm generation on the conventional generators. There should also be provisions for injecting the RE generation into the national grid to reduce the impact of variability. And there may, although it is already in the offing, express corridors for the same need to be developed. Research and development facilities and budgeting should also be not lost sight of to develop alternative sources of energy like geothermal, tidal, etc., so that we have a diversified source mix towards long-term energy security. Development of hydro power projects and reverse pumping mode, although Gujarat does not have much of it, is an option that would have to look at very seriously. Then there should be an aggressive promotion for use of solar appliances. Technologies may be encouraged for reducing dependability on conventional power, namely cooking, hot water, steam requirements, solar pumps, street lights, even local transport using electrical vehicles. Some of the options that Gujarat today is looking at is the solar wind hybrid, coupled with some amount of gas if it is available at the right price for a more stabler, less infirm power. We are also looking at the distributed generation, solar generation, in terms of small microgrids. And we do believe that the two have to coexist, and gradually the renewable energy, till we get this technology that Mr. Sardana has just mentioned, giving hope to the conventional power, we would need to increase the percentage of renewables in the total energy mix. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gulati. That really gave us a very comprehensive view of the kind of ways that Gujarat has been looking into things, and I'm sure there are lessons for other states and policy interventions. You spoke very rightly and correctly on some of the issues which are facing the energy sector today, coal washeries being one of them, scale, which has been emphasized very largely because earlier most of our capacities came on very small scale, and that did not give us the best of efficiencies. Grid integration, pump storage, forecasting mechanisms. I think increasingly it's becoming very important even for conventional power to have the renewable energy people have these forecasting mechanisms as they get into grid integration, and you need to know how they come in and go. With that, we are going to wrap up this session, not before thanking each one of you for actually sparing time and sharing your thoughts on this very important subject. I'd like to also announce that lunch is across this hall in the next session, the next hall, and the next session starts at 2 o'clock. Would request all of you to come back here for the session on renewables now that you've heard about conventional power. Thank you.